Once again, question of the offseason, or one of the questions of the offseason, is what are the Blue Jackets going to do about their goaltending? So let's talk about that on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, and to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, we're not going to have a whole conversation about the goalie situation that the Blue Jackets are in right now, because we've done that a lot and we'll do it again, but not today. Today, I wanted to do another kind of free agent Friday, as it were, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a veteran goalie that the Blue Jackets could bring in if they decide that's what they need, right? Because here's the thing. Don Waddell is being very kind of coy and, I don't know if we'll change. If it makes the most sense to roll the goaltending that we had last season back, then we'll do that. I don't believe that. Under no circumstances do I think that they will roll back the same goaltending that they had this season. Like, you've got to think that Daniil Tarasov is gone for a start, right? Arguably, Elvis is also gone. I'm less sure about that, but for the purpose of today's episode, we are going to work under the assumption that Daniil Tarasov walks. Probably they just don't qualify him as an RFA. Like, maybe they flip him, but based on his numbers this year, like, I don't think they can. Like, looking at the numbers, like, he wasn't the worst goalie in the league, but he was down there, right? He was not as bad as I expected him to be, but I don't know that his play has endeared him to any other teams, So I'm going to go ahead and say that Daniil Tarasov is probably gone, right? The question becomes, what do you do with Elvis? Do you try and trade Elvis? I know that I saw someone on Twitter the other day talking about how there's kind of chatter to maybe flip Elvis for an equally bad contract. I don't know what that equally bad contract would be. Like, I did this exercise maybe during the season, or I kind of looked up, like, do you flip him for someone like a Tristan Jarry, or do you flip him for someone like a John Gibson? I don't know that either of those options are better necessarily, but for the purposes of this, no Elvis, right? The Blue Jackets are going to bring in a whole, not really a whole new goaltending room, but I don't think they want to have to try and do what Colorado did this season, which was rework their goaltending on the fly, right? Like, they started the season with Alexander Georgiev and Justus Noonan. And at the end of the season, they had Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, who were both much, much better than the goalies they gave up, right? I don't think the Blue Jackets want to have to try and do that. I don't think that Elvis has showed, like, for better or worse right now, right? Elvis is the goalie that he looks like he is. I don't think that you can look at the body of work so far and be like, well, maybe next time he'll bounce back, right? I feel like we've been having this conversation for 3 years. If I'm going to come back better next season, I'm going to come back better next season. And, like, Elvis was good for stretches of the season, right? I wouldn't necessarily say long stretches, but the problem with Elvis was the consistency, right? And again, we've talked about this a lot. It was either feast or famine. We either got 950 save percentage Elvis, or we got like 870 save percentage Elvis. And what we really need was a 900 Elvis. There was what, when I spoke to Jeff Saboda about this, he was like, yeah, no, there was like 15 games this season where Elvis gave up fewer than two goals, but there was also 15 games this season, and these are not the exact numbers, but where he gave up more than 5, right? So he was either allowing fewer than 2 or giving up more than 5, and that's simply not sustainable, right? Like, the Blue Jackets did a pretty good job at outscoring their goaltending woes for, again, big parts of this season, but I think going into next season, if you can get the Elvis contract off the books, and whether that's a trade to pick up a different contract, again, I don't know who that contract would be. I tried really hard to pull up Puckpedia for recording this episode, and Puckpedia is down right now. So we're just gonna have to go with what's on the old noggin. And those are the only, like, the Tristan Jarry and the John Gibson are really the only two contracts that I can think of. So, and that really feels like just swapping one bad contract for another bad contract in the same position, hoping it's better. I wonder if there is a forward contract that they can maybe take on, someone who is maybe a little bit overpaid and has a couple years left on a deal for a team that needs the cap space. Again, I don't know off the top of my head what that would look like, but if they can open up some goaltending space and get rid of Elvis's contract, then, go with God, right? There are options for retaining salary, which I would be fine with. The Blue Jackets have a lot of cap space, and Elvis's contract, I believe, comes off the book, not next summer, but the summer after. So there's only 2 more years of the contract after this. So if you have to retain like 25, 50%, if you retain 50%, I believe that's $2.25 million that you'd have to retain on, which is not anything really. And Blue Jackets have $41 million of cap space. If they have to retain $2.5 million for the next 2 years, like, again, I'm fine with that. They're not going to spend to the cap this season anyway. I'm not anticipating that. Or there's the buyout, which also leaves money on the books, but it will be, I believe, less money, but for longer. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it'll be like, I think it'll be about $1.5 million on the books for the next 4 seasons. Don't quote me on that, but the last time I looked up the buyout, I believe that's what it was. Something like $1.5 or $1.7 million on the books for the next 4 seasons, as opposed to $5.5 million on the books for this season and next. So the long and short of it is, there are ways to get rid of the Elvis contract, whether that's swap him for a different contract, whether that's just get rid of the contract entirely, whether that's retain. Like, maybe they could trick Edmonton into taking him. I don't know. Edmonton sure does need literally any goalie, but I don't know that I would consider Elvis an upgrade over what they have currently, but maybe Stan Bowman will. And the Blue Jackets have fleeced Stan Bowman several times in the past, so we'll see. All of this to say, for the purposes of today's episode, the Blue Jackets are going into next season with Jet Greaves and someone. Now, who is that someone? Well, I want to talk about Jake Allen today, who is a veteran goalie who is currently in New Jersey. I wouldn't consider him like a journeyman necessarily. He's played on 3 different teams over the past 12, 13 seasons. He was in St. Louis for a long time. He was kind of supposed to be the future in St. Louis until he lost his job to Jordan Binnington around about the time they won the Cup. Went to Montreal, was fairly solid for Montreal for a couple of seasons, and then went downhill as the team started to go downhill, shockingly, and then has been fine on a New Jersey Devils team for the last couple of seasons. I believe he got traded there at the deadline for the 23-24 season. This season, he's coming off a .908 save percentage in 31 games, started 29 of those and had 13 wins, 16 losses, and an overtime loss, which doesn't sound great, but the Devils struggled in other aspects, right? And the goaltending is good. Like, you can't sit here and tell me that if you could get a backup with a .908 save percentage based on what the Blue Jackets were rolling all of this season, like, that you wouldn't take that. So I want to talk a little bit about Jake Allen. I want to talk about what kind of role he could play in Columbus and what the contract could look like, because he is 34 years old. So I don't necessarily want to get roped into, a long, massive contract. So we'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, like, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's super easy to lose track. I do it all the time. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They are your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. They're not just a budgeting app, though. They're a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you can start managing your money and start building wealth. Now that I've started using Monarch, I checked my bank account because I was away last week, and maybe I should have paid a little bit more attention to Monarch because I spent a lot of money on food, going out, having lunches, fun stuff that you do when you're on vacation. And Monarch would have stopped me from doing that if I'd paid attention to it and was not the worst. I don't even have to juggle multiple apps, though, is the thing. I could have just opened Monarch to check my finances, track my spending, and it even lets me plan long-term goals. Don't do what I did. Be better. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about Jake Allen because he's a guy that I kind of have been going back and forth on, right? The goalie free agency market is very weak this year. The best option got snapped up by his old team. I was all for giving Freddie Anderson a contract here. Not for very long. Again, 1, maybe 2 years at a push, but he's re-signed in Carolina, taking him off the market, and he was the best option, quite frankly. There's only, I believe, again, I had this on Puckpedia, and Puckpedia is down, but there's only, I believe, 16 UFA goalies this season, and one of those is Marc-Andre Fleury, who is retiring. One of those is Robin Lehner, who hasn't played this season, and one of them, I believe, is Chris Driedger, who also hasn't played in the NHL, this season. He's been in the AHL and has done fine there, but so really you're down to 13 goalies. Freddie Anderson, off. And then you're like, okay, well, what are the names like? You got Ville Husso, you've got, I believe Alex Lyon is up. You've got Dave Riddick, you've got Dan Vladar. Like, there's a lot of just fine guys. But there's one name that, again, I kind of backed away from initially because of his age, and then I kind of dug deeper into the numbers and was like, oh, okay, no. Maybe this works for the Blue Jackets. Obviously, there's some things that we have to consider. Like, does Jake Allen want to leave New Jersey? Does Columbus have an interest in him? What are they looking for in a goaltending partner for Jet Greaves? Like, are they looking for a veteran to start, maybe 30, 35 games a season? Are they looking for someone who can, be a 1A, 1B type situation with Jet Greaves? I think Jake Allen is way more of the former than the latter. He played 31 games this season, played 34 last season, played 42 for the Canadians in 22-23. Like, his career high is 61 games, but he hasn't done that since 2016-17. Like, he's basically been in a backup role since the 2019-2020 season. He's never played more than half the season since, in the past 6 seasons, if I'm counting right. He's also, again, 34 years old. And I think if they want a veteran guy to back Jet Greaves up, I think you could do a lot worse than a guy like Jake Allen. If it turns out that you want to, and again, goalies are tough. There's no young goalies on the UFA market. Like, if you want to throw an offer sheet at an RFA, like, you want to maybe chance bringing in a guy like Devin Levi, for example, who's been very good in the AHL this season for the Rochester Americans. And then you have someone that is ostensibly, I think he's about Jet Greaves' age. He might be a year younger or a year older. But he can grow with the team. He's about the right age. Hasn't really had a chance to break into the NHL in Buffalo, which feels wild to me because they decided that they would rather go with James Reimer and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen than give a young goalie a chance. Maybe that's unfair to Luukkonen, or Pekka Luukkonen? Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Let's go with his full name because I'm never sure where the hyphen is in his name. But, do you go after a guy like Devin Levi? Like, I know a lot of people said that they should have gone after Yaroslav Askarov. Last summer, he ended up going to the San Jose Sharks, obviously. I don't think that the Blue Jackets would have given up as much as the Sharks gave up to get Askarov. But it really depends on how the Blue Jackets feel about Jet Greaves. Because, obviously, I feel like he's kind of done it all at the AHL level. Not all of it. Like, obviously, he missed out on Goalie of the Year. For the last 2 seasons, but he has been the MVP of that team. he came up late this season. The Blue Jackets, Elvis was injured. They had no faith in Tarasov. And Jet started like 6-7 straight games for the Blue Jackets. And then played like 4 games in 5 nights or something, including a game in Cleveland, played a game in the NHL the day after, had a day off, and then played back-to-back against those 2 Washington games. And then, again, he played the rest of the season after that, which I think was about 5 or 6, potentially 7 straight games, and was excellent. Was, like, the Blue Jackets would not have been eliminated from the playoffs on, like, the second to last day of the season if not for Jet Greaves. He was phenomenal for them. They think he's ready. I think the question is how ready, and also, do they want to put all of their eggs in the Jet Greaves basket, right? He's still really quite young. He is, I wouldn't say completely unproven, but he does not have like a huge body of NHL work. Like what he does have is typically very, very good. He played 11 games this season, had 7 wins, 2 shutouts, and had a .938 save percentage. In 21 career games, he's got 10 wins, 2 shutouts, and a .924 save percentage. Obviously, that seems high. Chances are that will go down as he, picks up a bigger body of work. But, like, it really looks like he might be legit, right? Again, small sample sizes. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves here. But if they think Jet Greaves is the future, like, I'm kind of inclined to agree. But I also don't want them, like I said, all of the eggs in the Jet Greaves basket is kind of risky. So do they go out and get someone who can back Jet Greaves up and has the potential to take a little bit more weight if you need to, right? If Jet starts struggling 20 games into the season, let's say, do they want a goalie that can then go in and maybe go on a run and play, 10, 15 straight games if they need him to? Or do they want someone that can split it with Greaves, that can play, 40 to 45 games if they need to? There's a lot of moving pieces, right? So again, we're going to, for the purposes of this, Jet Greaves is going to be the starting goalie next season. Jake Allen would make an excellent backup, in my opinion. Again, he has been quietly really very good for basically his entire career. Again, he's not played a ton. He's 34 years old and has 460 career games. Like I said, more seasons than not has played like less than half the season. I think only 4 of the 12 seasons he's played has he played more than 42 games. And we're not counting one season where he did play 42 games. So I guess if you want to split hairs, 5 of the 12 seasons he played half the season or better. In all but 2 seasons, he's got an above 900 save percentage. Again, a 908 this season, a 900 last season. 2 years with the Canadians where he was kind of spotty. Had an 891 and an 892, which I believe is still better than the goaltending that the Blue Jackets got from either Merzlikins or Tarasov this season, right? So it fits. And like, again, you look at a 908 and you're like, oh, a 908 is fine. It's nothing special. But if you look into like the underlying numbers, which is kind of, again, I know just enough about advanced stats to make me dangerous, right? But if you look at how many goals saved above expected, so Jake Allen allowed 77 goals in 31 games this season. This is, I believe, all situations, not 5-on-5. Yeah. So 31 games, allowed 77 goals. Based on how many goals he was expected to allow, he actually saved 18 and a half more goals than he should have done, which is about 20%, give or take. Not quite 25%. But, near enough. And actually was saving over half a goal more than he should have done per game, which for goalies that played more than 10 games, which is a very small sample size, and I will adjust that in a second, but For goalies that played more than 10 games, Jet Greaves was actually the best in the league at this. He saved 1.3 goals above expected per game. So he actually saved almost a goal and a half more than he should have done in every single game he played. Allowed 21 goals in 11 games. He should have allowed 35 goals. So he saved 14 and a half goals more than he should have done all season. But I understand that's a small sample size. So if we cut him out, Jake Allen is actually third in the league in goals saved above expected per 60. So again, a lot of people look at goals saved above expected, but that's obviously going to skew towards the goalies that play more. So, for example, Connor Hellebuck is heads and shoulders above everyone else. He saved almost 40 goals more than he should have done this season, but he also played 63 of 82 games. So, makes sense, right? He did better. He was better than Jake Allen. The only other goalie that was better than Jake Allen with a reasonable sample size is Anthony Stolarz, who saved 25, almost 26 goals above expected. Jake Allen only saved 18 and a half more above expected, but he had exactly the same amount of goals saved above expected per 60. So he was saving more goals than expected per game at the same rate as Connor Hellebuck. Now, he played half the games that Connor Hellebuck did, so obviously that's a smaller sample size, but the numbers look pretty good. Like, again, he had quietly a very, very good season when you consider the fact that the New Jersey Devils were kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call them a paper tiger this season, but I think once Jack Hughes went down, it was really kind of game over for them. They lost a lot of firepower there. But the goaltenders I thought were really quite good. Like Jake Allen, especially, I thought Jacob Markstrom was fine this season. But obviously not as good as Allen. Obviously, the question becomes, does he want to leave New Jersey? Does he even want to come to Columbus? But if he does, what kind of contract makes sense for a guy like Jake Allen? And we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're talking all about Jake Allen and his potential new contract with the Blue Jackets. At the minute, he is on the second year of a 2-year contract that was originally signed with the Montreal Canadiens. That was $7.7 million. So cut that in half. We're at about 3.8, 3 3/4. Here it is, $3.85 million. I don't necessarily know that I would pay that much for Jake Allen, but if you give him a year at $3 million, I would probably even give him 2 years at 2.5. The problem therein becomes that you have to put the free agency tax on it, right? So, do you give him 3 years do you give him $3 million for 2 years? Do you give him 3.5 for 1 year? Because you either have to give him a year more than you want or $1 million more than you want. The sweet spot for me would probably be give him 2 years at 2.5 million. But if you have to up that by a little bit to either cut the contract down, or if you have to give him an extra year to keep the number down, that, I think that feels like the sweet spot to me is 3 million for 2 years. So doesn't break the bank. Obviously, again, if we're working under the assumption that Elvis's contract is not there, that's another $5.5 million that you've got freed up. It's not going to break the bank. Again, the Blue Jackets, I think the only team that have more cap space than the Blue Jackets are the San Jose Sharks right now. They've got $43 million, but they don't need a goalie. So, ostensibly, they might need a backup, but I don't know if they do. We'll see. Columbus feels like a good spot for Allen. I feel like it's slowly becoming a more desirable spot for free agents. I think a lot of people, again, this was one of the things that Johnny Gaudreau did for the team, right? Was he made everyone kind of sit up and be like, wait, if Johnny Gaudreau wants to be there, then maybe there's something that we're not seeing, right? But I think it's an young, up and coming team. I think they have enough cap space and the freedom to give Jake Allen probably a little bit more money than he might get elsewhere, or a little bit more money than he might get from the Devils to kind of entice him away from there. And the contract is short enough that, if it doesn't work, oh well, you figure it out. I don't know off the top of my head what the goalie free market looks like next season. I don't know if it's any better. Again, like I feel like the goalie free agent market is always kind of weird. You really need to either trade or draft a goalie to get anywhere with it. But if you really do truly think that Jet is the future of this team, then go out and pick up a guy like Jake Allen. Say, hey, 30 games a year are yours, but we really want to give the bulk of the work to this kid. See if he can do it. But Jake Allen, I think, is extremely capable of picking up extra work if he needs to. And like he's not like again, we keep saying 34 as if it's like older than dirt. He's on the old side for a goalie, but he's clearly still got something, right? I don't know that he quite has what he had, at his peak when he was, he had a 927 for the St. Louis Blues in the 2019-2020 season. Like that was by far his best season. I don't know that he got that in him, but again, if you can get 900 to 905 goaltending out of your backup and trust in Jet to do the heavy lifting, I think you could do a lot worse than Jake Allen. And because of his age, you're not going to sign him to an Elvis-like contract, right? Because and that's kind of the thing. And I said I wasn't going to talk about Elvis much this episode, and I immediately failed that. But if Elvis was making like $1 million less for a year less, there would be way less vitriol about him. Like if he was making $4.5 million and his contract was up next summer, people would be like, okay, fine, whatever. Like let's just get through this season. But because it's $5.5 million and because there's 2 years left, I think people are really it really gets at them. So you're not going to do that with Jake Allen. He's going to sign 1, 2, like I don't even think I was going to say maybe 3, but I don't even think that like maybe 3, but that feels like a push even if like the team wants to. I don't know that he wants to keep playing when he's 37, right? And the contract that you're going to sign him to, if you give him 3 years, again, the term will go down. If you can get 3 years at $2 million or 2 years at $3 million, like to me that feels basically interchangeable. And also, worst case scenario, if you have to bury him in the minors, it's a very variable contract as well. So Jake Allen is not necessarily my first choice to be one of the goalies for the Blue Jackets, but I think he might be one of the better choices if you do insist on going for a goalie in free agency, right? I think he will be I was going to say less dramatic than Elvis, and that sounds really mean of me, but Jake Allen, for my money anyway, and again, I talked a little bit to a couple of Habs fan friends, or I keep calling them Habs fan friends, but Scott Matler, who used to host Locked On Canadians, Laura Saba, current host of Locked On Canadians, and they were like, yeah, no, he just kind of gets on. Just kind of does his job. Seems pretty chill. And frankly, we could use a little less drama in the goaltending department. So if Jake Allen is going to bring a 900 save percentage and no drama, I am all for it, right? Give him the keys to the city if you want. Maybe not quite that far, but that's kind of my thoughts on that. And like, I initially was like, no, he's too old. I don't want this. And then the more I think about it, the more I've kind of talked myself into like, maybe we should go after Jake Allen on the free agent market. So we'll see. Who knows what John Waddell is thinking? Certainly not me. That's all I've got for today. I'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode of Locked On Blue Jackets. Thank you for listening, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I have been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets over on Twitter as well. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.